There's a sound every creative knows, the sound of a contract landing on your table. And there's a habit almost every creative has. You skim it, you look for the number, the money, the percentage, the fee. You find it, you're comfortable with it, you sign. You didn't read the contract, you read the number. Welcome back to the Vibe Lab, the podcast where we build the business and legal behind the art. I'm your host, FemiKnows. Today's episode is close to home for me because I've watched too many talented people get boxed in by paper they never actually read. Most creative contracts aren't written to be read, they're written to be signed. There's a difference. A contract written to be signed is designed to move fast, get past you, get to the signature line, get the deal closed. A contract that's read is a contract that's understood. And understanding is where leverage lives. So today isn't a law lecture, it's contract literacy. How to actually engage with a contract when there's no lawyer sitting next to you. Because most of you won't have one in the room for every deal. Not a small sync placement, not a brand collab, not the first record deal a friend's cousin or someone close is offering you. You need to be able to read for yourself and know when to pause and call someone like me. So let's get into it. Let's talk about, firstly, the clause everyone signs and regrets. The clause everyone signs and regrets. What's the one clause creative sign without reading that they always come back regretting? Two, actually. And they usually travel together. Now, the first is right assignment language. Specifically, how broadly ownership or grant of right is worded. People read, will distribute your work, and they sign. They don't clock that 3 paragraphs down. The wording has quietly shifted from license to assignment, meaning they've handed over ownership, not just permission to use it. A license says you may use my work under these conditions for this amount of time. An assignment says this work is no longer mine to control. That's the difference between renting your house and selling it. Both can look identical on the surface until you try to do something with the property later and realize you don't own it anymore. Now, the second is duration and territory, buried in the definitions section. Creatives will negotiate hard on the money, then let in perpetuity throughout the universe sail right past them in the right clause. Now that phrase means forever, everywhere, including formats and platforms that don't exist yet. Now I've seen artists sign that in 2015 for a fee that made sense for that year's market. And that same contract is still controlling how their work moves today on platforms that didn't exist when they signed. So, the regret isn't usually about being underpaid on day one. It's about losing control on day 1000. Now, that's the whole episode in one sentence. I've sat across from clients, creatives, holding a contract they signed years earlier, asking me why a platform they've never licensed to is trimming their work. The answer is always in the same place. A clause they skimmed past because it wasn't where they expected the risk to be. I mean, the number looked fine. The rest of the page did the damage. So you got to be very careful. Now, let's talk about what's actually negotiable. Now, here's where people get it wrong in the opposite direction. They assume the contract in front of them is the deal. It's final, fixed, take it or leave it. And a huge amount of it, more than people think, is actually negotiable. Now, territory, for example, is negotiable. Duration is negotiable. Exclusivity is definitely negotiable. You can often push from exclusive forever to exclusive for 12 months, then non-exclusive. Credit and attribution language is negotiable, and it costs the other side nothing to give you. So it's often the easiest win in the room. Payment timing is negotiable. You can move from paid on release to 50% on signing, 50% on delivery. Even termination language, how either party gets out of the deal is negotiable and is the clause most people never think to touch. Now, what's genuinely non-negotiable? Regulatory and statutory language. Those are things required by law, like certain warranties or compliance clauses. Now, those aren't really up for debate because they exist regardless of what either party wants. And sometimes, boilerplates around jurisdiction or dispute resolution is fixed because it mirrors the company's standard practice across every contract they issue. Changing it for one person creates a legal inconsistency they probably won't accept. Now, the skill here is knowing which category a clause falls into before you spend your negotiating capital on it. Leverage isn't about pushing out everywhere, it's about knowing exactly where pushing works. So you're not fighting over the one clause that was never going to move while missing three that will have moved easily. Now, here's a real pattern I constantly see. A creative will spend an entire negotiation arguing over a 2% difference in fee and never once ask for a shorter exclusivity window, which in the long run is worth far more to their career than the 2% ever was. You have to know which fight is actually worth having. Now let's move to how to engage a contract without a lawyer in the room. Let's get tactical. Say there's no lawyer in the room, which, let's be honest, in most rooms, most of the time, that's what happens. How do you actually engage with the contract in front of you? Start with structure, not language. Before you read a single sentence, map the document. Every contract has the same skeleton. Who the parties are, what's being granted, for how long, in what territory, for what payments, and how either side exits. Now fight those 6 things first. Once you've mapped the skeleton, the sentences make sense in context instead of floating on their own. Secondly, read every or, and including like it's doing work, because it is. Including but not limited to is a phrase that quietly expands a list to mean anything the other side wants it to mean later. Thirdly, flag, don't fix. Flag, don't fix. If something reads wrong to you, you don't need to know the legal language to fix it. You just need to say, this line concerns me. Can you explain it? Or, I'd like this changed. That single sentence, asked calmly, does more work than people realize. And when something feels off, but you can't name why, now trust that instinct. It's usually your brain catching an inconsistency before your eyes can name it. In that case, ask, what happens if I finish it with the worst case scenario? What happens if I want to leave this deal in a year? What happens if this platform doesn't exist in 5 years? What happens if they never pay me on time? A good contract has an answer to every what happens if. A bad one goes quiet. And one last thing. Asking questions doesn't kill a deal, because people are afraid pushing back signals difficulty and might cost them the opportunity. In my experience, it's the opposite. The parties who ask sharp, specific questions are treated with more care going forward, because now the other side knows you're paying attention. A simple habit that costs nothing. Before you sign anything, read it once for the money and read it a second time for everything else. 2 passes. That's it. The first pass tells you what you're getting. The second pass tells you what you're giving up. Now, quick fire 3 checks before you sign. Before we close out, here are 3 checks you can run on any contract in under 5 minutes. No legal background required. Number 1, find the word perpetuity or the phrase in all media now known or hereafter devised. If it's there, that's your duration and format clause telling you this deal has no natural end. Not automatically bad, but you should know it's there before you sign. 2, find the termination section and ask yourself, can I read in plain language exactly how I get out of this deal if things go wrong? If you can't find a clear exit, that's not an oversight. That's a design choice, and it's one you're allowed to push back on. Number 3, count how many times the word sole discretion appears attached to the other party's name. Every instance is a decision they reserved the right to make without needing your agreement. A few is normal. A contract full of them is a contract that isn't really a negotiation. It's a permission slip. Run those 3 checks on the next thing you sign. It takes less time than reading this far into the episode. Here's what I want to leave you with. Every contract in front of you is a structure of decisions somebody else made about your work. Decisions about how long they control it, where it can travel, what you're owed, and when you can walk away. Most of those decisions were made before you ever saw the page. Learning to read those decisions and knowing which ones you can change is not a legal skill. It's a career skill. It's the difference between someone thinks to happen and someone who shapes the terms of their own work. It's the difference between being someone waiting for things to happen and someone who shapes the terms of their own work. That's it for the week on Vibe Lab podcast. If this episode did anything today, let it be this. The next contract that lands on your table, read it like it was written about you, not just for you to sign. Now, next week on the Vibe Lab, we're going one layer deeper. Once you can read a contract, the next question is whether the deal itself is even shaped right. So next week's episode is called Every Deal Has a Shape. We'll break down how to evaluate deal structure, the shape of the terms, the flow of rights, the timing of the payment, and how that structure either compounds your career or caps it. So stay tuned for next week and make sure you follow Critical on every social media platform. Make sure you sign up for the Build Lab Cohort 2. The waiting list is out, so you can just, join. And I'll see you next week on the next episode. Thank you very much.